All right, so welcome. Tonight, Bob Mulligan is going to be talking about Venus, and I will turn the call over to him. This is his second presentation. He's been very generous with us in doing two. And tonight is on Venus, and I think it's going to be really great. And I'll turn it over to him in a minute. But I want to tell you guys something first. Um, AOA is doing a course, and I'm not necessarily I'm not done with it, and it'll be probably Jupiter and Leo before we get done, but I'm working on it for the AOA, and if you want any information about it, you're welcome to check it out on the AOA website. The reason I'm bringing this up now is because this book, Bob's book, the heart the heart of astrology, just synchronistically appeared when I was thinking through how I wanted to present the planets. Got the rest of the course kind of done, the setups all done, houses and signs and blah 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 are all done, and then now I want to energize it with the planets, and I was kind of stumbling around a little bit on how I wanted to present them, and Bob's book appeared, and I realized that I'm going to it's a wonderful book. It's a good book. I'm going to use it a lot it'll be in my bibliography of sources for the course. So I wanted to bring this book for those of you who are studying astrology or learning it, or even want to expand your awareness of the energizing properties of the planets and how they affect everything they touch and us. This is just it's a good book. So I just want to point that out to everybody. This is a good book. If you're looking for good books, this is one. So The Heart of Astrology by Bob Mulligan. And it came out in 2025, and I didn't realize it was so new. When I knew he said he had a book, but I didn't realize it was so new. And it is. So anyway. With that, I am going to let him share. I don't need to do anything. He can just take on the screen share, and I'm gonna let you run with it.
Great. Wonderful to be here. Thank you all for making the effort to show up, even though we're in different places. Hopefully, sometime in the future, we can do this. We're all in the same room together, which is my preferred way of doing a presentation, but this is sweet. And it's a great evening. We have the moon getting ready to trine Jupiter and Venus. Venus and Jupiter are getting ready to conjunct each other in a couple days here. It is a calming time in what is, after all, a very difficult period of human history. If you're not worried about anything, either you're a saint or you're just not paying attention, because the world is in such chaos.
It is.
Period. Anyway, I want you to feel free. If you have a question, you can ask it. We'll go off down a number of side routes here, because I'll make sure that I get the core material that I wanted to present to you tonight to you regardless. Well, could you imagine a world that was only in black and white, where there were no colors? Could you imagine a world where you had no partners, where you had no money? Well, that would be a world without Venus. And of course, it's ridiculous. You can't have a world without one of the planets, but it's helpful if you can just sort of mentally see all of the things that a planet relates to, and see what would life be like if that wasn't happening. So, people ruminate about Venus as the planet of love, the planet of truth and beauty. All of that, of course, is true. But we're going to try to unpack this in a way that will make applicable sense to you, things that you can take and actually put in your own chart and say, oh my God, yeah, it does work that way. My focus in astrology has always been, what can we do with this magnificent tool to elevate human consciousness, starting with our own, starting with ourselves. Uh, and my interest in astrology has always been on that side. And I always have my students be responsible for being able to look at a chart and see events. You know, if somebody gets in an automobile accident or they get married, they change jobs, those things show up astrologically. And it's important to be able to do that. But that's not where the real activity is. It would mean nothing if you couldn't look at a chart and see something in the person that told you what they're really about and why they do with the things that they do, why the things that happen to them happen. And Venus plays a really critical fulcrum point role in understanding the bridge between the energy, the mindset, the soul of the individual, and how the things unfold in their life. Now, I'll mention a few books going forward, and I'll spend some time on the literature later. But I wanted to just mention off the cuff that if you're looking into the planet Venus and you want to become really proficient, one book that is very helpful is Dane Rudhyar's book, An Astrological Study of Psychological Complexes. There's very, very good material in this book on how Venus and Mars relate to each other. Now I'm going to show you a few things here that I think will help. I'm going to do this screen sharing thing here. Let me see.
There should be a share button at the bottom of your
Yeah, I know.
screen.
I've done this a lot,
Right
but
in the middle.
yeah, I know. This is the zodiac. Surprise, surprise. Well, Venus rules Taurus and Libra. You can think of Aries as the Big Bang. It's like, here's how things get started. And Taurus is the second sign of the zodiac. Taurus is the result of what has happened in Venus, what has happened in Aries. The sign opposite is Libra. And whereas Aries is, this is me, this is mine. And Libra is, no, that's you, that's yours. And Venus and Mars play off of each other all around the zodiac. It's Mars is the first sign, Taurus is the second. Then when we get to the other end of the zodiac, where we get the other side of the wheel, where we're starting into the pattern of how we interact with others, Libra is the first, and then the second is Scorpio. I know that in earlier talk of mine called Unlocking Your Spiritual Potential, I correlated the signs of the zodiac with the 12 nidanas, which the Buddha said was one of the ways to enlightenment, was to understand the 12 nidanas. And Aries is ignorance, and Scorpio is desire. And those are the two Mars-ruled signs. Now, I'm going to show you something else here that I think helps with this a bit, because we're going to talk about the imprint that Venus makes through the entire zodiac, not just through its signs of rulership. Let me see if I can let's see if I can find this now. I got too many signs. That's the problem here. Okay. Okay. Let me see. I got to go back here and go to my share button, and then, you know, I should learn to use PowerPoint, and this would be much easier. Many people have tried to explain it to me, but it sort of eludes me. Okay. Yes. Let's take this one here. This is Venus in rulership, and then Venus in its exaltation in Pisces. Now, Venus and in Pisces is, of course, it's very strong, but the point is that the three signs of Venus form what's called a finger of God aspect, or a yod. And why this is important is that this formation puts tremendous emphasis on Libra, which is the relationships. Now, Venus is present in all relationships, and there's several ways of really understanding how Venus comes to have meaning in our life. But I'm going to just take a quick shot at this at describing Venus on symbolically in our solar system as the planet that brings us to the inner world, that brings us to the experience of beauty. Let me see if I can grab this. I'm sorry that I actually ended up with so many screen shares that it makes it a little difficult for me to sort it out. And it doesn't help either. I don't know if the rest of you have had this problem, but it seems like just when I learn something, they change the interface. And it's like, oh my God, now I got to learn something new. Okay, so I want to do screen share again. And now I want to uh, this is a simple diagram. If you think of unity, the sun, the experience of God realization, the experience of we're all in this together. And then you think of here we are in Earth. When we cross through the circle of the moon, now the moon makes a circle on the Earth, and everything that comes to us on Earth has to pass through the circle of the moon. The moon is the mother that is containing. It's like the aura of the Earth. And anything that's going to come to us has to come through that circle. Well, when we cross through that circle, we either can go to the inner world, which is Venus, or we can go more into the outer world, which is creation. This is Mars, the energy. And as again, it's like all of the planets have a positive role to play in our development. As my Capricorn teacher, Doris Hibble, used to say to me when we would talk about Saturn, where would you be without your bones, skin, and teeth? You have to have a Saturn. And Mars is your immune system. Mars is your physical strength, your energy. And you have to have that. But you also have to have Venus if you're going to have any relationship to anything else outside of your experiences of just yourself, which would be a pretty poor experience if you just experience yourself in isolation. Now, I wanted to um, um, point out one other thing about the zodiac. The devil made me do it. I've got to um, um, show you this. Now, if you can split all of the signs of the zodiac into three categories: the elemental signs, the individual signs, and the universal signs. The best book on the zodiac ever written is called The Zodiac, A Life Epitome by Walter Sampson. And if you, and many of the people that have been before us uh, drank liberally from that book. CEO Carter used this division. Dane Rudhyar used it. Marcia Moore and Mark Douglas used it. The point is, these elemental signs are the building blocks: Aries, Taurus, Gemini, and Cancer. And the next four signs are the individual. This is where the human beings live and experience: Leo, Virgo, Libra, and Scorpio. And then the universal signs, which are Sagittarius, Capricorn, Sagittarius, and Pisces. Well, I'm taking a moment with this because I wanted to explain that Venus rules one of the elemental signs, one of the individual signs, and is exalted in one of the universal signs. So Venus is the glue that holds all of the experiences that everybody and everything has in creation together. What would it be like without love? What would it be like without money? What would it be like without any color in the world? It would be bleak. So it isn't just that Venus, it makes life worth living, which it does, but it helps give us a purpose. It helps give us something to aspire to, uh, a vision of something higher than our own life. And when we enter the spiritual path, there is a balancing of the head and the heart: Venus, the heart, and Mercury, the mind. And those two uniting and being balanced with each other allows us to take that journey inward. You know, uh, the early in the 50s, the head of the UN, Secretary General of the UN, was a man named Dag Hammarskjöld, who said he wrote a book called The Longest Journey is the Journey Inward. And it really described the human experience as how we raise our consciousness is by raising our vision to something that's beyond our own life. So one thing that is important to remember, I know there's a lot of preliminary stuff here, but one thing that's important to remember is that the planets create, they rule everything. And the aspects are ruled by a particular planet. And Venus rules the sextile. Well, sextile is an alchemical aspect that takes two ingredients, puts them together and makes one, like oxygen and hydrogen making water. You have fire and air augmenting each other, making one thing. You have earth and water making one thing, bringing them together. Let me see if I can, I think this is kind of important. I'm going to skip forward here and what did I, well, you know, yeah, we think of the world as, being in this kind of flux. And I have a friend, a woman friend, is a Christian minister, and she's always complaining about, how women are suppressed in our culture. And I think, you think this is bad, you should go and be in Iran for a while, or, like somewhere in the Middle East where women really are suppressed. But the point is, uh, our sexual identity is something that has such a strong imprint that people identify with their gender, um, and so over the top. Um, but the truth of the matter is, um, at the time of the birth of Christ, about that time, the procession of the equinox was crossing from Aries into Pisces, which was in the precession of the equinox takes 26,000 years. So it's about 2,100 years for the equinox to progress backwards through the zodiac through a whole sign. We entered what's referred to as the Piscean age. Okay. So we're coming to a conclusion, coming to the end of that period, obviously. And as we enter this period of the Aquarian age, there's a balancing. Venus in Aquarius is this universal love principle. I had a friend who with Venus in Aquarius, and I would be fond of saying to her, I know you love humanity. It's people you can't stand. It's like it's like the universal concept is great, but individual people annoy you. It's a distancing that is created. And that form of detachment is coming in this next period. It has to. It is necessary. So there are really three ways of getting chummy with Venus. The first, as I was showing you, is being able to see her position in the zodiac. Venus is receptive. Venus gives. Venus is open. Where Mars is singular. It's the individual energy. That receptivity of Venus is necessary in order to be able to move into something that is new, that's beyond what you have ordinarily experienced. But there is another way of understanding of Venus, and that is to look at the role that Venus plays in your physical anatomy. Now I'm going to show something here again. I'm going to just have to get better at this. I had it all worked out, and then they changed my interface, and then I got troubled. Okay, so here is the human body with the chakras. The chakras are, of course, the wheels of light that bring energy from higher planes of consciousness into the physical body. And if you damage somebody's aura, that damage is real, and no matter how you try to heal their physical body, they can't contain the energy that would have healed them. Well, Venus rules the heart chakra. Well, this is really important because the heart chakra is the fulcrum point that balances the three lower chakras with the three higher chakras. And it has that mediating influence. Your equilibrium, the balance in your body, your pH balance in your body, all of this, the kidneys, the filtration, all of these are balancing mechanisms um, that you couldn't live unless you had them. I think that this is a very interesting factor as well, is that when you breathe in, um, you your oxygen goes into your lungs, and the hemoglobin circulating through your bloodstream goes into the lungs, and it bonds with oxygen, and then it carries them to the cell, and then it lets go of the oxygen, and then it picks up carbon dioxide and carries it back to the lung, and you exhale it. What's interesting is hemoglobin, everybody knows hemoglobin is iron. You have iron in your blood that makes the color red, the red blood cells. But what people often forget, it's copper that makes the assimilation of iron possible. You could not digest or assimilate iron into your system if it wasn't for copper, and copper is ruled by Venus. Venus, again, plays this critical role in so many factors in our body. So I just wanted to mention it. It's interesting because hemoglobin, again, is this miracle of the alchemy.
¿Te gustó?
Yes,
I accidentally muted you, Bob. You need to unmute yourself. I apologize.
that's okay. Am I unmuted now?
Yeah, you are.
Okay,
Thank you.
fine. Well, the point that I'm making is that we need Venus. We need the function of Venus, the heart chakra, to allow for the assimilation of iron into the chemistry that mixes and makes the hemoglobin in our bloodstream, which again, life depends on. We wouldn't have it without it. It's like I was hearing an interview with Elon Musk recently, and he was saying, empathy is a sign of weakness, and that people, it's like I think think of what you want of him, or not. But I mean, he's obviously on the spectrum somewhere. He's autistic. He's very bright, but he has no ability to develop any real relationships with people, and that is, an unfortunate function. Now, during this period of creation, the highest souls and the lowest souls have taken form simultaneously. And it creates this great polarization, which is helping bring about the turning of the age. And it's, uh, again, we can't dispute. And again, the beauty of being an astrologer is you have an insight, the ability to look more deeply into all of the things that happen in the cosmos, in your body, between you and others. But the point is that whereas Saturn is the base of the spine, the first chakra that develops, it gives form to the physical body. And it is, I'll just quickly mention it. Saturn is the opposition aspect, and you do not spiritually advance unless you're in a physical body. Between lifetimes, you don't. But when you come into the physical body, that is the opposition aspect. You become grounded. Unity is the conjunction, which is the sun. Semi-sextile is the moon. Semi-square is Mercury. The sextile is Venus. Mars is the square. Jupiter is the trine, and Saturn is the root chakra, the Muladhara, as it's referred to in India. Anyway, so I'm moving along here. I wanted to say that Venus is most approachable just by dialoguing with the goddess herself. And she's open, she reveals herself to you. And when students of mine say, well, that sounds nice, but I don't know how to do that. It's like, well, okay, I've, been on first name basis with all of the deities for so long, I forget that, stepping into that may take some work. What I suggest to people is the reason I talk about the human body is to recognize that you have the deity, uh, Mars, Venus, Jupiter, Saturn, the sun and the moon, all of them in you already. They just need to be awakened and paid attention to. They're there. So what do we do when we're talking to Venus? Well, one thing you can do is a journal. You can spend time writing about Venus. Now, obviously, you can't journal in the abstract. You can say the word Venus, 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 but if you have no raw data, it becomes very difficult um, to just go off into fantasy land. But we're all like the three blind men grabbing a hold of the elephant. And we think of the elephant as whatever part of the elephant we on the body, we think of him as a wall. We have a leg, we think of him as the trunk of the tree, or we grab his tail, we think of him as a rope. And all of the astrologers that you run into have something to say. They have some piece of the elephant. We all, as astrologers, suffer when we are so mistaken as to think we have the whole enchilada, because I've never met anybody that did, and I've had my chart done by what everybody considered to be the best of the best, and everybody has something to say. But let me see if I can find this now. What was I going to share? Oh, yeah. Well, the first thing, if you're gonna if you're gonna if you're gonna get cozy with Venus, you want to get cozy with the Venus literature. And I can share this with you in print later on if anybody wants it. Just email me or phone or something, and I'll give you a copy of this. If you're going to study Venus, this is again, I'm limited by what I know, but I try to be thorough on this. Venus, the Evolution of the Goddess and Her Planet by um, Ronnie Gale Dreyer, who I used to have, I knew her very well in the early days of astrology. And I have a signed copy of this book from her that I got at an ESAR conference in 2000. But her book is miraculous. It has the entire history of where the goddess Venus in mythology came from, how it's looked at in different cultures. And she has a very good comprehensive analysis of Venus by sign, house, and aspect. And although you'll see this in many textbooks, her book laid it out very, very clearly, and I think succinctly and extremely well researched. It's scholarly. It's got an index. All of the references are labeled clearly. Extensive bibliography. Again, we live in a time when people are very like into podcasts and seeing videos and stuff. but me, I'm a book person, and I love being able to read a book and be able to look at the footnotes, go back and mark it, and go back and look at it again, and and relate it to other things that I know. It's kind of the way that things expand for us. Um, Ivy Goldstein Jacobson, who is uh, an astrologer that people, when I first entered the field, that she had quite a following. I only knew one of her disciples, for lack of a better word, a guy named Gilbert Navarro, who was a horary astrologer who was extensively invested in her work. But her book, Here and There in Astrology, has some really good insights on Venus. Again, it's packaged with a myriad of other things. It's not just Venus, obviously, but her work is definitely totally worth looking at. Again, Spiritual Astrology by Krishna Namacharya was a book came out in 1966. Again, I never met him. When I started to correspond with him, he just had passed away, and I talked to by email. I talked to by physical mail. I talked to his disciples. But this book, Spiritual Astrology, has a very, very good insight into the way that Venus functions. The downside of it, uh, if you want to call it a downside, is you really have to it you have to suspend uh, judgment on certain things that form our picture of Western astrology, because it's very Hindu, it's very theosophical, it's very rooted in that tradition. Now, the the mother lode in the Western tradition on Venus, besides Venus and the evolution of the goddess and her planet, is Mysteries of Venus by Mark Lerner. If you're of my age group, which some of you are, I'm sure, you remember Mark because he started that magazine, Welcome to Planet Earth, which many of us subscribed to for a long time. And he was, I've never met him, but he promised in his book that he was going to put out a new edition of this book, Mysteries of Venus. He is a Pisces, and so his mind kind of wanders all over. The last chapter of his book is poetry, and sections of the book are autobiographical. He talks about being at Thin Horn and, starting his magazine and how he met his wife and all this stuff. But he's a Pisces, and it's like he he wanders, but he has Saturn in Virgo, and he carefully documents and he introduces concepts that you're familiar with from other people who do, podcast stuff now, which is the pentagram that's made by the Venus conjuncting the sun, which it happens, in this 8-year pattern that creates a pentagram, which other people have taken it and run with it. But he lays it out and shows why that's important and what kinds of things happened during that period. It's interesting too because it's an 8-year cycle, and um, if you study Hindu astrology, the Venus dasha, that period of time measurement, is an 8-year period of time. Anyway, again, all of this is a huge study, and I've already mentioned that Dane Ridger's book, The Study of Psychological Complexes, is there. Now, I'm going to just mention, Ivy Goldstein Jacobson mentions the house that Venus is in your chart of birth is a place where you receive fringe benefits. You get a little something extra. And it's important to remember Venus rules addition. And so where Venus are, something gets added in. And it is a leg up. Again, Venus and Jupiter considered to be the two benefics. Jupiter rules trines, Venus rules sextiles. And trines just, they are. They're the cosmic Santa Claus, a greased hog sliding down the slide. But sextiles, they're called a plant opportunity. Well, they aren't passive, like you might consider a trine, but they are active all by themselves because they are blending things. Now, as I said, Venus rules the sextile. Mark Edmund Jones, who was considered to be the dean of American astrology, said that you can tell your life's purpose by looking at the closest sextile in your chart. And inevitably, he was right. I mean, in a general sense, there are people like Ted Kennedy that had no sextiles in their chart, but he obviously had a life purpose and worked very hard. But you can ferret this out, and it becomes an important spiritual point for you. Now, I wanted to just mention that when we're trying to come to some understanding, how do we get into a meaningful dialogue with Venus? If you study the signs, the houses, the planets, and Venus's relationship to other planets through these things, what you inevitably come to is that you recognize certain qualities in yourself, and to start talking to those qualities in yourself, dialoguing with them, puts you front and center and in the position of talking to that deity herself. After you've studied Venus for a while, it becomes very fluid. You start recognizing, oh, yes, I have things that I like and things that I don't like. I have things that stimulate me, that make me feel good. And then there are things that happen in life where I'm neutral. I don't feel positive. I don't feel negative about it. But Venus rules that proposition of separating experience into different things that you like or dislike. And the things that you like, when you augment them, again, the next sign after Libra, the sign of feeling, the sign of where we decide, we come to Scorpio. And Scorpio is the sign of desire. And, we are desiring things that enrich us, that our consciousness raises. I have 5 children, and I remember I was with my 2, which are now my oldest children, and they were the only children I had at the time. And Hannah, my daughter, says to me, Dad, I had this candy that I got at school, and when I shared it with my brother Sylvan, I felt good. Something inside of me, I felt really happy. And I said, well, Hannah, as my spiritual master, Meher Baba says, real happiness lies in making others happy. And she thought, and she looked off into the distance, and then she looked back at me and she said, I think not. I thought, oh God, she's going to be a rough one. But at least she went through the process of evaluating that experience that she had, and she was learning at that time to come into attunement with her Venus and eventually being able to talk to Venus in a more direct fashion. And, Venus is very loving. She wants to give of herself. And so you read and read and read, and you find out what, you know, Grant Louis had to say about Venus and this, sign and what, it's like, and you have to study, when you're studying Venus, you have to study her in every sign, in every house. Almost inevitably, people get a textbook and they're looking up, well, I have Venus and Leo now. What does that mean? It's like, yeah, but you also don't have Venus in Cancer, and you have to know what that means. It's 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 like it takes a while.
God, you're boring.
Yeah. We have to go through as an astrologer. I have one of my students been a student of mine for like 50 years. And she's my soul sister because the two of us bond over the spiritual path. But when I tried to help her enrich her study, she really has no interest in doing case histories or studying the lives of famous people. And I'm saying, this is this is part of the process. This is how you get better. But if you have that purity and you are actually able to zero right in on the planets, amazing things open up. So what happens when we get to a place where we get into a comfortable rapport with Venus? There is a form of meditation on the love that is very uplifting. And there is a side channel on this. Everybody meditates all the time, even when they don't think of it in a systematic fashion. They're thinking on something that they're attracted to. But when you do a meditation of the heart, it is helpful if you take a perfect master, a saint, the avatar, an incarnation of the beloved, and you dwell on them, and you, for the time that you're meditating, you keep everything else out. That is a meditation on Venus, a personal meditation on a spiritually advanced figure. And the reason that you want them to be spiritually perfect is that anything that you think about comes into you. And if you're thinking about somebody that you dislike and you're thinking about the thing that person all the time, you're drinking poison. You're bringing that into your your soul. And it's hard. It damages in some perceivable way your mental body. And when you leave this lifetime, you will leave your physical body and you'll get a new one in your next lifetime, but you won't get a new mental body. That will go with you from one lifetime to another. And when there's damage, it's very difficult to break yourself free from it. So the learning to meditate on Venus is a positive thing. When I'm talking to Venus, it would be concentration, not meditation. Meditation, your mind is still. Me, it's like having a date with a girlfriend. It's like we're in dialogue with each other and sharing things. And it is extremely purifying. the way that your kidneys purify the blood. It's a remarkable experience and one that I recommend. It's the same procedure in, slightly different forms is adaptable for learning about every planet. And again, it's like recognizing that there is a triangle, which again is Jupiter. Jupiter is a triangle. Jupiter is the planet of the king of the gods. Jupiter rules decorum. It's like how things should be. They have the planet, you have your inner experience of the planet, and you have the external manifestation. And when you go into a forest and you relax, you spend time with the trees, you are imbibing Venus in a very pure form because Venus rules nature. And the tree has something to give you, and you contact her through that. It's a wonderful experience, a very, very beautiful thing. You can meditate anywhere. You can be in a high rise on downtown Manhattan and go into a meditative state and contact anything and everything. But it is easier when you're in a natural setting. In the evolution of form, when your soul takes incarnation in the human form, you start interacting with the environment in a different way. Human beings develop hope, where they're digging in the earth and developing farming, developing scientific inventions, and building skyscrapers and all kinds of stuff. And when we're in the presence of the things that human beings have built, there's a different vibration. I know everybody here at some point has gone into the woods and they're camping, and you look over and you see an empty styrofoam cup in a McDonald's wrapper. And you're thinking, oh my God, somebody was here and they left this stuff from civilization. And it has an impact on your thinking. And of course, you feel like picking it up and taking it to a trash container. But when you're in a place like Zion National Forest or the Grand Canyon, or, like some place where you have access to these complete unfiltered symbols of growth in nature. It's very healing, very stimulating. The mental impressions that we have in our body, in our mental body, after we've come into the human form, very, very, very difficult to overcome. And so it is nice every so often. They have a word for it in Japan that has become part of pop culture in the United States now. It's called forest bathing. You go into the forest and you just bathe in the energy of it. And that is a wonderful way of being able to get into contact with Mother Nature in that way. Now, I have some charts that I'm given to want to show you, just as a sort of a sidelight. But as I say, as I said at the beginning, my main interest has always been the reason for doing astrology for me was very simple. My master gave me this to do, and then gave me the focus of Like, hey, you can use astrology to forecast the weather. You can use astrology to forecast the stock market. You can use this to understand any number of different things in life, but its real purpose is to help us as human beings to reach for something higher, to elevate our consciousness. It's very easy to get angry, especially you see it like two kids, one 17, one 18, go into a mosque and then they shoot up and kill a bunch of people, and then they go off and commit suicide, and then they're um, they're posting comes to light, and they all this hatred and misunderstanding comes out. And one boy in this posting in the news recently said that he was going to go and kill a bunch of people because he couldn't get a date with a girl. It's like, wow. It's like, talk about having a bad day. It behooves us to keep working on that relationship side of the personality, where we want to experience love. We want to um, give it. And as the Beatles said, in the end, the love that you take is equal to the love that you make. It's the law of karma. As the Buddha says, when you get angry and it's like holding a hot coal in your hand and you're going to throw it at somebody, but it's burning you. It's, it's like Jesus saying to his disciples, if you cannot learn to love each other, how can you learn to even love the people who are torturing you? Because we have to get to a place where we are able to embrace that higher side. Now, it is true that the sign of the zodiac that your Venus is in tells you something about how you want to express your Venus. That texture of the sign of the zodiac gives you a covering. And it's like you meet somebody with Venus and Aries, and the energy comes right out. The desire to be first is so strong. Now it's very, interesting. I talked to you about Mysteries of Venus by Mark Lerner, as well as Gail Ronnie Gale Dryer's book on the Venus, the goddess. They both talk about Venus rising before the sun or after the sun, and when Venus rises as the morning star, people with that placement tend to be more aggressive, tend to be more outgoing. And people who have Venus as a setting star, as Vespers, the evening star, they tend to be more passive, more traditional. And so for kicks, I did what other astrologers have done. I got all the charts of the well-known feminists. And all but one of them had Venus rising before the sun because they were a trailblazer. They were going to push the envelope. Oh, who was it that had Venus setting? Oh, God. I got a ton of notes and I can't remember. It was a woman who wrote the book The Feminist Mystique. And she had Venus as setting. And I thought, this is very interesting. But when I did a study into her life, she did a lot of things that were very traditional and very set in her ways. And it was a personal statement of needing to break out of that. But again, looking at the cycle that Venus is in. Um, Mark Lerner, as well as Dane Ridger, talked about looking at the Mars-Venus conjunction before you were born, and that tells you something important about how your love life is going to unfold. Again, there are so many, as Mark refers to, the mysteries of Venus. And the deeper that you look into it, the more that you find that that it's uh, um, a descriptor of very basic things. Now, Dane Ridgard pointed out something that I think is very important. Venus is only retrograde for a short, I mean, it's a 41, 42 days. I always just say 40 days every 2 years. And that is less time retrograde than any planet that can be retrograde is retrograde. So it has to mean something. And so if you gather all the people's charts that have Venus retrograde, the one thing that I found was is that they always had a different way of expressing their need for love and beauty than ordinary people did. Hitler had a retrograde Venus, but so did my master, Meher Baba. And so again, it I I give a definition for every sign of, Venus in every sign of the zodiac. I give a definition for Venus in every house and for every planetary combination in every aspect. But the truth of the matter is, it's always the larger context that determines the exact functioning. And so I'm putting it out to you. Uh, when you're studying a chart, yes, of course, you look at the house sign and aspects of Venus, but always look at the phase. Is Venus out in front of the sun? Is it moving back? Is it retrograde, making the interior conjunction to the sun? Venus, when it makes the interior conjunction of the sun, that's like a new moon. And it will always be retrograde during that phase. Anyway, there's the material goes on, it expands. But I'm happy to take questions if anybody has anything that they're curious about or just want my opinion on. I'm happy to give it.
Yeah, I was gonna say this might be a good time for a Q&A. And if anybody has a question, if you want to put it in the chat, uh, we would take a minute and answer questions. And also, if you need a break, maybe 5 minutes. Does anybody need a break? No?
I'm happy to give a break or take a break or whatever, but I'm fine to keep
Okay.
going.
Pearl pointed out that it's Betty Friedan is who you were talking about.
Oh, thank you. You know, as Mick Jagger sings, "What a drag it is getting old."
I know the
The,
feeling.
the thing, the thing I dislike about it most is just losing things like that memory. Mm.
Yeah, it's frustrating. I know. I've got it too. So does anybody, this is really interesting, Bob. I'm enjoying the heck out of this. I can tell you that right now. Does anybody could you expand on Mars Venus conjunction beforehand birth, before
Yes,
birth?
I I will mention it in two ways. It gives you, again, this is not a paraphrasing of Dane Ridger's work on this because he had a he had a slightly different take on it. But if you look at that, you know, every planetary pair is a cycle. So th- again, forgive the long introduction here, but Jupiter Saturn is the longest studied cycle going way back thousands of years in both the Hindu tradition as well as in the Babylonian tradition. The only thing that was studied that was longer than that is the eclipse cycle. But that 20-year cycle tells something about what is going on in the whole culture. If you remember the diagram of the zodiac, I won't put it back up, but the elemental, human, or individual and universal, Jupiter, Saturn, Saturn, Jupiter. You know, the the rules and the laws, how the universe actually functions, is told by Jupiter and Saturn. Jupiter and Saturn conjuncting are in a very positive, open, optimistic streak for 10 years when they're going from the conjunction to the opposition. And then they're in a consolidating, more conservative mode as Jupiter comes back toward Saturn. It's been studied long, long, long thousands of years. And I used to give a talk on, like the 20th century, with Jupiter, Saturn conjuncting, and then this very optimistic period taking off, and then very pessimistic period, just I'm not go through it, but the 60s are very optimistic, going to the full moon, and then the 70s being very conservative, and then the 80s, again, when Ronald Reagan became president, people got on this very optimistic uh, tangent, and it was like the world had, was being reborn. And then we ended up into the 90s, and it was depressing. And then the um, uh, going into the 2000, it was like, it was, I remember it was the 10th of January 2000. I was sitting with, maybe I shouldn't say the name, but an astrologer who's a good friend of mine who runs a mutual fund. And he says, we're 10 days into the new millennium and I've made $10 million since the start of it. It was like this incredible optimistic, um, shooting forward period of time. But my point is, you asked about Venus, Mars. Well, Venus and Mars are in this cycle with each other. And I'm saying when Venus and the cycle that Venus and Mars was where they were with a conjunction before you were born is a demarcating point that tells you something about how relationships are going to unfold through the pattern of your life. Uh, Based on that pattern alone, you can see whether I don't want to speak out of church because, the whole pattern is inside a larger context, but it can tell you whether the person's going to get married, whether the marriage is going to be happy, or whether it's going to be difficult. Um, all in the Mars and Venus tells more than just male female relationships, but you know that yeah, I know that you all had this experience. If you're paying attention to the news at all, it's like as the Epstein files comes out, you go, "Oh my God, not that person too." You think, "Oh, geez, this is terrible." It's like we're in this sort of cleansing cycle when all of this, you know, difficulties comes to the surface. Again, forgive a sidelight in this. Remember a little earlier in the talk, I was talking about the precession of the equinox, where the period where the equinox was progressing through Taurus was a time of the fertility cults and the worship of the moon. The Taurus is the sign of the exaltation of the moon. And then we moved into, going through Aries, and there was this tremendous uh, a period of like a belligerence and very masculine. And then I was saying, when the Piscean culture started in going at the time of the birth of Christ, some of you are in my group, my age group, you'll remember um, uh, Ronald Davison. I had great relationship with him, studied with him. He was a British astrologer. But he pointed out that just as we were changing from one age to another, in the Colosseum, one of the most popular gladiator fights was one gladiator had a net and the other gladiator had a short sword. And it was like the symbol of Pisces and Aries in battle for each other. But when Christ was crucified and was put in his tomb, Joseph of Arimathea got permission to have his body, put in the tomb. But all the scriptures agree on this one thing. Who was it that first saw Jesus in the flesh after the crucifixion? Mary Magdalene. Jesus had 12 male disciples and 2 women who were very close to him that functioned as like super disciples. Mary, his biological mother, and Mary Magdalene, the woman who was the only person who stayed to the end of Jesus's crucifixion with great reverence and adoration and love that was superhuman. And Jesus, when he said to her, "Go and tell my disciples that I am risen." Now, of course, both of my parents are Christian ministers, and so I have a lot of the stuff while dwelling in me. But it's important. What's really important here is to recognize that we were moving into a period when the feminine energy was through the physical form of male and female bodies, the feminine was starting to rise up and will continue. And at the time of the Uranus-Neptune conjunction in 1821, this was a very critical time period where from that a moment on, it wasn't like one day, it wasn't like boom, but there was just a period of time very rapidly. We entered into a period where strong souls were being recruited into the female form because the spiritual path is feminine. It's a path of pure receptivity. And in order for people to advance spiritually and easily, the 2 forms had to be brought into some kind of equilibrium, some kind of balance. And so you saw these strong souls coming into the female form from that point on, and it accelerated. Do you know in 1972, if you were a woman uh, and you were living in some states like Nebraska, you couldn't open a checking account in your own name. It had to be your husband had to do it for you. If if you married and died, your whatever your whatever land you had went to your husband. Anything in the female lineage was cut out completely. I'm just I'm I'm saying you just to see how rapidly we've come in a short period of time. There was a there was a book that came out uh, a, a few years ago by Stephen Pinkert called The Better Angels of Our Nature. And he's a atheist, a Jewish atheist who he's the head of the Department of Psychology at Harvard. And he wrote this book. It's about, 3 inches thick. And it he documents very carefully from the beginning of recorded history how the world is actually becoming less cruel since the beginning of recorded history. And he points out, and again, I can give you the astrology background of this, but after 1965, uh, that people did not, in a cultured group, put down African Americans as less than human anymore. That yeah, it wasn't again, uh, integration was long road, and we all know the history. But it was at the time of the Pluto Neptune conjunction that there was a sharp demarcation point. We had everything that happened before that in the culture and everything that happened after that. It was about a 4 year period between 65 and 69 where things changed. And it's important because right now, for the first time since then, we have we have the Uranus, Saturn in harmonious aspect with Uranus. So Neptune and Saturn, Neptune, Jupiter, Neptune, Uranus, and Pluto are all in harmony with each other. And this is the first time since the conjunction of Pluto and Uranus. It's very important, a turning point. I know this was more than you were asking about the in terms of the Mars Saturn Mars Venus conjunction, but I just tell you one. I used to own a bookstore, a metaphysical bookstore, and you know I had this woman come came in, and she was foaming at the mouth about how men did this and men did that, and it's like, yeah, okay, yeah, you're right. But she was, very belligerent and very steamed up about it. And my spiritual master opened a portal right over her head, and I could see through to her last lifetime. And she was a very abusive man who was abusive to women. And it was like, oh, okay. I could see how she was experiencing that in this lifetime. And just because it's it's her karma. Doesn't mean you shouldn't feel compassion for her and try to, do better by her or whatever. It's like we are all called upon to do something better than what our karma might dictate or what we can see somebody else is struggling with. But that's Venus. The Venus in us is brings that love forward. And it's like there's an old Hindu axiom, you should worship the highest form of the deity that you can feel love for. You know, I've, Venus serves two purposes in the astrologer's life as an astrologer. One is that it's the Taurus function that you amass. You look at a chart and you're able to see the whole thing, to put it together as one entity and be able to talk to that person. It's the other thing is the Libra side. The astrologer has the obligation to be able to communicate to their client, but also to be able to listen to their client. I remember in my early years of astrology, I was nailing it. I was so on top of like this and that and this. And this client came to see me and she didn't say anything. She's a Scorpio, of course. And she's getting ready to leave. And I took her arm and I said, well, did you like the reading or what? She says, well, everything you told me was true. And I think it's miraculous, but I don't see how it helped me. And it was just like somebody shot me right through the forehead. I think, okay, you got me. What good is any of this if it's not helpful? It's like, and so Venus, the Libra side of Venus for the astrologer is the ability to reach into even if you're just doing a reading cold and you're not seeing the client, to be able to reach into them and to be able to give them something that's meaningful and to be able to hear from them verbally or from their chart what they need. So, I remember a British astrologer saying to me, we're trying to do something that's just a little more delicate than brain surgery. It's it's a it's a miracle. Astrology is such a potent frame of reference. Even if we're a complete idiot, we're likely to hit something. It's it My spiritual master said astrology is the perfect science, but out of a million astrologers, one understands it. And that astrology has to be interpreted in the culture in which it arises. I took that last statement for me as meaning that I'm to practice Western astrology. I have Moon in Gemini, so obviously I study a little bit of everything else, like the North Platte River, a mile wide and an inch deep. But I I I believe, and I'm very close friends with a couple of one Western Vedic astrologer and one Indian Vedic astrologer, best friends. And we share notes on some things, but I don't have the bandwidth to study another whole system for real. I have to stay connected with where I'm going deeper and what I'm getting. And I try to do better astrology every day. If I'm not doing better astrology now than I was when I got up this morning, I missed something. So ask me anything. I'm happy to share what I have.
We had a conversation going on in chat about the closest sextile conversation about the life path, which I found really interesting. I looked at my chart, and
Yeah, good.
so it's Mercury and Jupiter, which is yeah, absolutely correct. And mine, Rhonda's asked about hers being the node and the MC. And does it count? Does it have to be planets or can it be points?
Uh,
Or,
if it's a node, there is, I would say, let's talk about the planet in the context of life purpose. But a sextile to the north node of the moon is extremely important, and I will address that. Because remember, the nodal axis is an opposition. Opposition is Saturn. And Saturn is substance. This is Saturn's world. It's hard, substantive. You know, we're airy fairy floating around in the ethers between lifetimes and the heaven state or the hell state. And then we have a determining samskara, a determining mental impression that brings us back into incarnation. That is shown by Mars. The Mars in your chart is the primitive impression that brings you back into incarnation. But what is that brings you in, but what's the here that we're in? It's Saturn. We take on a physical form, and it is only when we're in the physical form that we develop karma, that we can make spiritual progress, that we can advance. It's like if you think of yourself as falling into a swimming pool, and it's like you're flailing around, but when you get your feet on the bottom of the swimming pool, you can push off and go up. It's like that. You have to get into the physical form, which is in Saturn's world, and then you can climb out. Remember, Saturn, the Lord of Karma, is in its exaltation in Libra. The moon is in her exaltation in Taurus, the other feminine deity. Well, Saturn rules father, moon rules mother. You know, in the ideal world, and I can say in my family where I grew up, I had a mother that was loving. And I learned socialization in the family from my mother, which you do in society. It is the feminine energy. It is accepting that you become socialized. If you didn't have a family, if you were raised in the wilderness by the baboons or something, you have no social skills for getting along. But then you grow up and you're coming of age, you're 21. Now it's not just like you do shit and everybody says, oh, isn't that cute? You break the law. You know, Saturn is the socialization process outside the family. It's within the larger civilization. Now, and those again, Libra and Taurus, you know, the two Venus signs. Venus is, I can't convey strongly enough how Venus is the fucking cement that holds all of this together, but it seems to be like behind the scenes. We don't ordinarily recognize her for what she really does. Unless we get on a bandwagon and we start beating the tom-tom, in which case we're saying Venus, but we're really doing Mars. It's like, and getting the balance between the two is so important. Now, the nodal axis, you know, Rudyard, I think, was the first astrologer that talked about what's this 1930, the south node of the moon is the past. North node of the moon is the future. And people have expounded and explored, like and made much of it. A sextile to the north node of the moon is not passive. It isn't like, oh, well, I got this talent. You do in the sextile meaning of the word, you do have to strive. It is an opportunity to work and make something better. But remember, if it's sextile the north node, it's trine the south node. And the south node of the moon is a place where we we have a repeating habit pattern from the past that we always want to do, but we're never fulfilled. We desire it, but we're never fulfilled through it. And so it's something to overcome, usually. I mean, I, I, Swami Kriyananda and Doris Hibble were two astrologers that I studied with in my hometown of Chicago. And Doris would had the south node of the moon in Leo. She says, "Well, if I did this in my past, I could do it again." It's like, yeah, yeah. And she is right, and she did it quite well. And I'm not taking anything away from her, but it is also true that at some point the soul would have to learn to live out the north node. You know, um, some of you knew Michael Luton, who he knew more about the nodal axis than anybody I ever met in the astrology community, and he was like an expert at it. I asked him one time, look at if you only had 15 minutes to talk to somebody about their chart, would you talk about the nodes? He says, if I only had 15 minutes to talk to the person, I would only talk about the nodes. And he made that a living premise in his life. The point is, oh, an example, Michael Luton says, uh, uh, the south node of the moon is like it's a hot day and you get a big glass of ice cubes and you pour Coca-Cola into it. And then somebody brings you a hot fudge sundae. And the smell of the bubbles coming off of the Coke and the taste of the hot fudge sundae is so delightful. It says the north node of the moon is a diet soda and a Metrical wafer. It's like, it's good for you, but it doesn't taste like anything. But what you find out when you are concentrating on your north node and doing it, you do it quite well. A planet in sextile to the north node um, pulls on that energy. But what you have to do is to be able to interpret that sextile to the north node in light of the fact that it's trying the south node. So it's easy for it to fall into strengthening qualities connected with the sign that the south node is in. And it is harder for it to strengthen the qualities of the north node. But it's doable, and the planet that is in that position is there to help you do it. So I don't know if that answers your question or not. I wanted to say something about Mercury, Jupiter. The sextile between Mercury, Jupiter is, remember, the sextile is alchemical. It's blending two things together. It's, like two, I mean, H2O, two hydrogen, one oxygen, and boom, you have water. It's something new. But
I did write a book about it.
yeah,
Yeah,
the thing is, remember, Mercury is our sense perception. It's how we gather data out of the environment. Jupiter is our higher mind. Mercury has a subservient role as the student to learn from the teacher. But the sextile is a harmonious aspect, and so you're learning to do things with your thought process that is supportive of your values, that's supportive of your higher wisdom. I had a client come to see me that had, I mean, I would say a colorful expression, a way of being, and she was in the auto industry and had a high position in the auto industry. And she was, what would you say, in a male-dominated environment where people had a rugged, salty way of expressing themselves, and she could curse with the best of them and stuff. And she she was bright, and she had that Mercury sextile Jupiter.
I can also curse with the best of them.
And I said to her, I can tell you that you find it almost impossible to tell a lie.
That's
You
also
are to
true.
speak your truth, regardless of what the consequences. She says, that has been true my whole life. Even when I was with two belligerent parents as a little girl, it was very hard if somebody asked me to tell an untruth. I just couldn't do it. It's because the higher mind and the lower mind are connected by that sextile, and there is a glue to that connection that makes you want to give out whatever your truth is. It's it's an interesting thing. Anyway, I'm again, I don't want to go on too much with it, but it does show your life purpose, and that any any again, Mark Edmund Jones was an interesting person. I had some private conversations with him, and you know, when he wrote, his writing seemed incomprehensible to me. It was like, you got to be kidding. There's got to be a simpler way of saying it. It's like saying, well, grab your ear, and he would go like this, never taking it seemed like he got it right, but never, and he would use common words in their most obscure sense. And he had many, many jobs. One time he was a script writer in Hollywood, and one of my students says, God, the dialogue he wrote must have been insane. But even when he was talking about sensitive things like the passing of his wife in a private conversation, he had a way of speaking and a way of putting together thoughts that was uh, clunky. But he came up with some things like the sextile, but the closest sextile in your chart, which I found to be a very useful nugget. And I've seen it work time and again. And as I say, you will run into people who have no mentionable sextiles in their chart, like Ted Kennedy. And it's like the guy he worked really hard, but he never seemed to get a break, and his weakest stuff always seemed to come out. So, um, is there any other question?
Yeah, does anybody else have any questions? There any, otherwise I'm gonna ask more.
Knock yourself out, Rosie.
So I wrote down all the books that you had. Now I want you to do on all the other planets because I'm on a
Well, I
roll.
did that for Jupiter. I gave a
Yep, you
reading list
did.
of Jupiter. I'm
I got that
I'm
one.
going to do a talk on Mars. I'm going to do a talk on Mercury, talk on Saturn. I'm going to cover the other planets in this way because, you know, again, I, Joyce Hohen I haven't seen her in a long 20 years, but she's really an intelligent astrologer. And I was at a workshop. She's from the Netherlands. And she was here at UAC. I think it was in 2002. And I was in a workshop with her, and she was talking about how you could demarcate the times in a person's life by the transit of Saturn going through the quadrants of the horoscope. And I said, Joyce, did, you're trying to expand on Lua, Grant Louis' concept in his Astrology for the Millions.
Mhm.
And she says, "Oh, I have that book, but I never read it." I said, "Oh, okay, well, all right. Well, you know, I'm guilty of that too, having, access to things that I haven't read. And, you know, Mark Edmund Jones is a tough read. One of my best friends, who's somebody who passed away a couple of years ago now, Alan Oken, um, uh, told me, like Mark Edmund Jones was the most boring astrologer he ever read, but he taught me astrology. Quoting him, says, he taught me astrology. So, he has something to say, but it's sort of like the way I feel about some of Dane Ridgear's books. It's like, what did you say? Are you kidding me? But again, the man is brilliant. And if you can crack the code and get into it, there's some really, really important things. And again, I'm the first to admit not every book enamored me, but there's some books that are just solid gold. Anyway, what else did you want to ask me about?
Somebody was asking the Michael that you mentioned that was the expert on the nodal axis.
Michael Luton,
Luton, okay.
he's passed away now. He was known for his sense of humor. When he
Yeah, I
talked,
remember him. Yeah.
he 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 spoke French. He taught under many different circumstances. He took a couple of years off. He lived in New York, and he went to see stand-up comics. And he decided he was gonna, become like Mr. Humor, and he was. He was. He had this unbelievable sense of humor, but he was very, very good astrologer, but he wanted to become expert. There is a collection of 6 cassette tapes that he did over a weekend workshop, maybe 30 years ago. And if you have access to them, I would suggest, it's worth the time. It was Friday, Saturday, Sunday workshop, uh, and to listen to them.
Where
I
are they? I mean, are they?
I don't know.
That's
I
one of those
haven't been
things we're
able
going to
to
want in the library, I think.
see if you can find them. But if nobody's done it, I will. I have the tapes, and I will, find some. I'm not going to transcribe them because I'm not a masochist.
No, we'll do that, but we
But
need to raise the
I will find
copyright on
some
them.
machine that will, you know, transcribe them. I used to have a machine that transcribed tapes, but
You probably have a lot of stuff we want in the library.
I gave away I gave away a lot of machinery. I used to have a machine that made, like 5 copies of a DVD simultaneously because I would copy them and sell them to my students.
So
Um,
the Michael Luton tapes, are they, is there a copyright on there? Is there somebody
I
that
don't know,
owns
and I've
them?
never, I mean, there has to be. I mean, I don't know, you know, um, I'm very close friends with Arlen Weiss, and I could ask her because she was very close to Michael.
Would you?
I will, if you remind me,
Okay.
on some things I'm pretty sharp, but that short-term memory thing, unless I've got it written in my appointment book,
I
I
know, me too. I'm writing
I
it down right
forget.
now.
I don't mean to, and I don't mean any insult to people, but I try. My spiritual master, Meher Baba, said, be very careful and when you make a promise. But once you've made it, do your very best to fulfill it.
Yeah.
I
I will reach out to Georgia when she gets back and see about, she knows our
and
advice too,
and
so,
if you stay on me with
okay.
this, I will I will help. I have some of Michael Luton's books and some of his pamphlets and things that he's done. And I have lots of lectures of his. But that workshop on the nodes was like golden because he spent so much time doing just that. Um,
Yeah, I'm also interested in listening to that. But
yeah.
the things like the cassette tapes, we probably have a lot of the books cataloged already in the catalog, but things like the digital, that's gonna be something that we're gonna lose if we don't preserve it. So
And I
that's
gotta
what we're
tell
going
you,
for.
early on in my career, I gave away some of the, like things, that I had on cassettes. The people says, "Oh, well, I'll digitize it and I'll give you back copies of the digits," but I never got them
You
back,
didn't,
and they're
okay,
gone now. It's like,
yeah.
okay, yeah,
That's what we're trying to keep from happening. So I'd be interested in, and I'm sure we are interested in any of that,
sure,
especially
why
with
not?
somebody who's passed away and the copyright may be available easily.
Yeah, well, the copyright, I think, unless it's renewed, is only good for like 17 years, and I'm sure we passed the 17-year mark on
Mhm.
these,
Yeah. All
unless
right. Well, I'll ask you. Keep be in touch on that. So, is there anybody else that had anything to ask? Let me look through here. Um, oh, we're still having a conversation about the sextiles. I was kind of answering her in text, but if you have more than three sextiles, which is closest to what?
which is
It's the
closest
by
by
degree.
aspect,
Yes.
degree
The
and minute.
whichever one of those sextiles has the closest is closest by degree. The planets are closest to each other
Right.
by degree. So
There,
if you
I
know that,
want to I want to
yeah.
chime in.
Okay.
There's a couple of things in astrological lore that I've had difficulty getting complete closure on myself. It's like Mark Edmund Jones also talked about, um, you know, when you're having different types of charts, you have a bucket chart. Suppose you have two planets that are making the handle of the bucket and they're within a degree of each other. Do you consider that? Well, how about if they're within 2 degrees or 3 degrees? It's it's an energetic thing.
Yep.
It's like you have to kind of use your intuition on it. And
Well,
this is
yeah.
one of those things on, do you know um um uh uh, uh was it Jackie Schlevin who wrote the book Finding Success in Your Horoscope? And she talks about
I have that book.
the closest planetary aspect, the planet making the closest um, aspect to your midheaven tells about how you go about bringing in uh, the goal. How you manage to bring home the bacon. What again? Her, the system. I love the book because she starts out very simply and she expands it, chapter by chapter, just adding in 1 degree at a time. And it's very clear, but there'll be certain charts where you look at, well, there'll be one planet is, like within a degree of a trine to the midheaven, and there's another planet that's within 30 minutes of arc into the midheaven. And you're thinking, well, should I use both? You know, yeah, yeah, your copy looks better than mine. Mine's been
Probably because
digested.
I haven't read that much of it. I think I'll get into it now.
I honor the fact that you take pristine care. Look at this book by Mark Lerner. It's like falling apart in so many ways. And he says in this book he was planning on putting out a second edition where he would have an index in it and blah blah blah, all of this stuff. it's not in print. I don't know. I'm going to reach out to him, see if he's still alive and can find him because the guy is brilliant. And if nothing else, I'll buy another copy of this book.
Which one is that?
This
Michael,
is
Michael or Lerner?
mysteries,
Mark
mysteries of
Lerner.
Venus.
Yeah, I don't have that. I'm gonna get it.
It's it's totally worthwhile. It's again, I enjoyed it better this time. When the first time I read it, it was I don't mean I maybe too far out for me. He went off in so many tangents, but he's a Pisces, it's like that's what he's supposed to do. It's like it's like, but he's brilliant, and the stuff is is totally worthwhile. You know, again, I took a workshop on again social media for astrologers, and it was supposed to meet for an hour. I forgot how many times, 5, 6 weeks or something. And and the person who very kind person, very good, but she talked about her personal life for about 3.5 hours. And in that whole 3.5 hours, there was maybe 15 minutes of things about how social media is monetized on the internet and how to get, um, something posted in mechanical things. Every class was at least 3 hours long, and every single class had about 15 minutes of stuff that was totally invaluable that I don't think I would have gotten from anybody else. I just had to wade through all the other stuff. And it was like, and I realized that when I was younger, when I first entered astrology, and I read this book back in the 80s, um, I probably had a jaundiced eye on it because of his approach to things. But he's got things in there that I haven't seen in anybody else's book. And he certainly works harder. He certainly works harder than just anybody else in the field on certain things. And to have published that book, having published that magazine, Welcome to Planet Earth, for I don't know how many years, 7, 8, 9 years, and it was excellent. And I knew Tim, who started, the uh, mountain astrologer, and
Mhm.
how hard he worked and the sacrifices he made to keep it going and stuff. It was like, it was, I mean, I remember being at UAC and him being in the trade show asleep under the tables because he couldn't afford a hotel room,
Yeah.
and it's people in the astrology community do not understand often what sacrifices professional astrologers have made to be in that field. That was the reason that I wrote the book Between Astrologers and Clients. And it sold pretty well over the last 25 years. My publisher now, um, Regulus, uh, it, Paula Bellamini and Michael Fielding run it. Um, Paula did almost all of the diagrams that I use in the talk tonight, but she's a brilliant astrologer in her own right. Um, but she's got me putting out a new edition of Between Astrologers and Clients, and the new edition will probably be at UAC.
Are you going to UAC?
I am, if you can believe, I mean, I couldn't believe it, but this is the first UAC that I haven't been asked to speak at since the very, I don't know, in this century anyway. I don't remember. I think the first UAC I spoke at was Orlando. But I will be at the UAC, and I will, I will have copies of my book there, and I will, schmooze with, you know, well, if you're going out, you and I can have
I'll be
dinner.
there. I'm trying to decide when to go and when to come back.
I'm
Much
gonna,
extra
I'm
time.
getting there on the 2nd of September and leaving on the 9th. So, um, anyways, so it should be great fun. Now, are there any other questions? Oh, this is the book by Ronnie Gale Dreyer. If you're interested in Venus, you absolutely have to read this. And if anybody has read anything on Venus that covers this territory in any better way or even as competent, I want to know about it because I couldn't find it. Um, but again, that doesn't mean that it's not out there. It could be I just haven't stumbled on it. Anyway,
All
so
right. Well, it's
what
almost 9 o'clock. Are you tired? It's been 2 hours.
is I when we started into the session tonight, um, Saturn and Neptune in Aries were right at the bottom of the chart. So I started out tired. I came in, but um, we've moved beyond that. And I had to, I was given the option of which I selected what I thought was going to be the best aspects, for my chart, but for everybody's chart. And, that moon in Pisces being in trine to the Venus Jupiter, I thought this has got to be juicy. Something's going to come out of
We
it.
did have a lot of people come tonight, a big crowd. So,
We did?
yep,
I only saw 4.
25.
Oh, okay.
Yep. And that's people that came in person. The rest of them will catch the video on replay. So,
Oh,
pretty
cool.
big
That's
show.
good.
Yeah.
Because
I was going to ask you something else, and I just forgot.
I had
Oh,
call me up and tell me that they were coming tonight. I don't know that they are here or that they came.
I suspect they did because there's a lot of people I'd never, I see the same faces a lot that we get a lot of repeat attendees. So there's some new people tonight.
Well,
So they're probably yours.
I will come and talk to this group anytime that you ask me
Well,
to.
thank you. We appreciate that.
I
I've got my work cut out for me for my class because I want to review all of this stuff you mentioned.
oh God. Hey, does anybody have any other questions? Because again, there I tried not to do too much of what's in my book. I try to add in things that aren't there. There's, with each planet, there's this much space and there's this much material.
Yeah.
How to get it into, you
That's
know,
kind of what I was kind of grappling with in the course. How much can people tolerate?
well, a lot of it, I'll tell you, Julia, it has to do with sequencing.
Hmm.
If you give it to people in bite-sized pieces, they can usually come along with you. If I remember the second chapter of my book, um, The Heart of Astrology, my editor read, the chapter uh, Unlocking Your Spiritual Potential. And I saw her a
Let's
week
see what
later.
chapter that is.
I saw her. It's totally different now. But when I handed it, she says, "I feel like you tied a rope around my neck with an anvil and threw me off the side of the boat." I gotta be kidding. I sank like a stone. Murder. I it took me 20 years to write that book because it got edited to death. And
Really?
I had volunteer editors that were professional editors in their day job. And I had people that I paid to come and edit that that was what they do for a living. And it's like, even with that, even with that and even having been proofread and stuff after it went to print, there were mistakes. There were things and I think, how did that happen?
Yeah, no, me too. I found that out too. I read that thing 20 times and then I found stuff in print. I don't remember. I know editing in the olden days, back when I used to work for a newspaper, and man, editing was really tight. You didn't miss anything or you got in trouble.
You, you
Now
know,
they're just a lot more careless or, easy. I think was because it's so computerized.
I was living in Champaign, Urbana, and there was a man that I knew who had a typesetting business, and he set the type, they had like, I don't know, 30 people that worked for him, and they set type by hand.
I was back, yeah, we did on the old
Okay,
linotype machines. Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, the old printers with their bottle underneath the machine sitting there doing.
Yeah, no, no, the thing is, and I said to him that when I got my first dot matrix printer,
Uh-huh.
and there was a word processing program that could do justifiable type. It was sloppy, it wasn't good, but I looked at it and I went to him right away and I says, sell your business.
Yeah,
Yeah, because you will go bankrupt in a few years because the handwriting is on the wall.
yeah,
It's all going to be electronic.
yeah.
And he says, "Oh no, but handset type is so much better." I says, "It
It
won't."
is better. It looks better. It's crisper. It's prettier. I've computerized type. I hate it.
Yeah, but
That's,
he lost all of his ads. He
yeah.
lost and it went it the
Oh,
business
yeah.
actually
Oh, I
got.
mean, I understand that, but it was definitely the going from linotype to computerized printing was a degradation in quality of type.
I know, I
Hard for
know.
the artistic ones to get used to. Very hard.
Well, it's like here you and I are talking.
Mm,
We've never physically met. I got to talk to all of these people and I got feedback and we shared, and we're not in the same room.
yeah.
Okay, I hate it. I wish we were all in the same room, but I do this and I'm happy and I know all of you do it because it's the next best thing. We can't all be in the same room right now, and we can cover so much more if we do it this way.
Yes.
I mean, trust me, I'm
Yes.
I'm a dyed in the wool, go for the best, but sometimes, you can't do what is best and get it done.
Yep. Yeah, you're right. I mean, yeah. Well, it's after 9 o'clock and I could do this all night, but
I
I
know,
think
but
we
I thank you,
probably
everybody. I
should
appreciate it.
let people go.
I
Oh,
want,
by the way, one more thing. It's Grant Louie's birthday today.
oh, that's,
Somebody just put that in the chat. Happy birthday, Grant Louie.
I want to share one other thing with you. Um, Let me just hear, if anybody's still here, you should see this
Yeah,
because
we
after
got
all,
some people hanging around, quite a
I
few
thought
actually.
I thought about this just as I was putting just getting ready to come into the meeting tonight. Okay, I'm going to share two things. Here, this is the first thing. If you haven't seen my book, here it is. I think this cover is beautiful.
I love it. It's very pretty.
And Paula Bellamini designed this for me, and my hat goes off to her. And one other thing here, and I always forget this, but I actually did remember it tonight. And I quickly put this together, um, which is my contact information. So if you want to get a hold of me, call or write, visit my website. You know, I'm I answer all of my emails, all of personal emails I answer myself, which is a lot every day. And um, somebody will get back to you if you phone. I don't usually give this out. This is my cell phone. So you'll get straight to me. Anyhow, You take care.
Those
I,
who've donated to AIP have access to your cell phone. That's an advantage.
that's great. I have my office phone. I never pick it up. I Everything goes to voicemail, and I do answer what's left on the voicemail, or my daughter Katie answers it. But um, I I don't usually give out my cell phone. I just did it tonight because I was feeling Venus. You know,
I hope you don't regret it.
no, I don't regret anything, but I do regret some things, but it's another story. I, I had this overwhelming feeling of love coming in tonight, and I felt love for each of you. And it's not, you know, people talk about love, but I remember reading um, Mert, Thomas Merton saying he was down near the center of town and he suddenly felt love for all these strangers walking by. It's that feeling that overcomes you. And when your vibration rises to where you're living out of your heart chakra, you feel happy with, just being on the planet, and love for most people most of the time. As a Tibetan, through Alice Bailey, said, when you live from the heart chakra, you feel love for, yeah, humanity. And it's a wonderful thing. Anyway, I bid you all a farewell and a happy evening.
Happy
Thank you.
Venus Jupiter, everybody.
I really enjoyed our time together.
Me too. Thank you so much for your
You take
donation, for
care.
your time. And I'm going to shut the meeting off. It's after 9, and thank you all for joining. The video will be up for the replay for those who've donated in a couple of days. Bye all.